Hello, everyone. It's a bit later than last night, but better lighting, hopefully. I'm not quite so freaking out on the system anymore. Tonight, we're going to talk about part B. You'll do very well today working through the first part of it, part A. And what was particularly impressive was seeing you having remembered the stuff from yesterday and making sure that you were able to talk about that length. So I'm really pleased with what you did yesterday. Of course, I'm not able to give you the results of that until after half term, as far as I'm aware, but you will get them at some point. So well done today. Now, the second part of the assessment, of course, is taking it on and building a piece of software in Python. I'll just naming no names, I think, is the important bit there. But everyone had a go. That was impressive. Everyone had a good go. So what we're going to do today is we're going to work through the second part, and we're going to start really by having a look at the mark scheme, because the mark scheme really doesn't help us that much in regard to this. If I pop that up there, and I am in the right corner this time, which is quite good. That we are dealing with part B, which is the Python programming activity. You will not be doing question 1, because question 1 involves you just editing code that they give you. And to be perfectly honest, the edits are the same every single year, more or less. It's an exercise really in can you spot the patterns. That's not what I wanted to look at assessing. I wanted to have a look at assessing your actual programming ability, which is really quite good. So we're going to have a look at that. And remember, the question 2 is doing the programming, and question 3 is actually doing the comments and the explaining of how the program works. I'll do both of those. But on the right hand side here, we have all of the mark scheme. I want to go through that before we start working. So first of all, indicative content in this case is only 4 things that they're talking about. You get a mark for opening the data file, a mark for reading the contents, a mark for comparing the client's criteria to the list, and a mark for incrementing the contents of the client's found variable. Now, that sounds a lot like the flowchart that we looked at today. And to be perfectly honest, the mark scheme here is a bit sad, really, for the amount of work that has to be done, which is why we're not doing that question. But this is the mark scheme for the question that we're doing. And the question, as you can see, is a bit more in depth. There's a bit more to it. It's not quite the same old stuff that we're doing. So mark scheme here. There's a mark for input. Whoopee. So as long as we've got one bit of input, we'll be perfectly fine, right? Then there's any 4 validation methods. So we need 4 different validation methods, some of which are easy, and you can pick any 4. Only do 1 of each. There's no point having 4 or 5 presence checks, because as soon as you've done 1 of them, the mark's there. So 4 of each sitting in the code somewhere. You're going to save it to a text file. It must be called, in this case, plumberdetails.txt, but please have a look at what it's supposed to be called on your exam paper. I cannot give you the mark, annoyingly, if you don't use the right file name. So please just be aware of that. Then we're going to get the plumber's details from the file, and this is the interesting one, right? A HCI fit for purpose. Well, what does that mean? That's a human computer interface fit for purpose. What they're really saying there is they want a user interface. Now, look at the last bit, though. Textual or GUI. Nothing in your specification says you need to be able to build a graphical user interface, which we could look at into Kinter, but to be perfectly honest, it's so complex and weird and filled with foibles that there's really no point. But with that in mind, you do need to build a nice looking user interface. The menu must be useful. You want to clear the screen every so often. You probably want to put a bit of timing in so you can pause things and move back and forth from that. The mark scheme banding then. Top marks. It has the majority of functions. It has 70 items of the functionality signaled up here. So that's what we're looking for there. And then the second one, used and fully exploited the program facility of the language. That's where some of the nice techniques need to be implemented. So subroutines and stuff like that need to be included. Demonstrate a sound and Italian appropriate tools and techniques. Yeah, written code that's well structured. Well, hopefully it'll be anyway if you follow my sort of guide. And a user interface which aids user interaction and is intuitive. So there's some really nasty things there in that last point. It always seems to me that they're desperate to say, we want you to build a GUI, but they can't say it. And so they put stupid things like that. But as long as you build a nice looking command line interface and it works well, you'll be fine. A question popped up. Sorry, I'm just going to look at that one. It's that one of the past paper questions doesn't have .txt for a file name. You literally have to put exactly what they say the file name needs to be. So if the file name doesn't say .txt, you just save it as that. It's not going to make a difference for us on Replit. It would make a difference if you were on Windows, but we're not going to do it on Windows tomorrow. We're going to do it, on the built-in Windows Python compiler. So what we're going to do now is go over and build that. So what we need to do, and here's question 2, and word for word, they're the same every year, except the name of the company changing with the file changes. We want to input plumber details, validate their details. Remember, we need to use 4 of them, store their details, search for them for a number of criteria. Right, let's jump over to Replit. So I'll move myself to the other corner now because otherwise I'm in the way. There we go. And what we're going to start with is the same old. We need to use the autosave and autoload code that I've talked to you about a couple of times, because that is going to give us the ability to save to a disk and load from a disk with minimal effort. So we start by making a blank array, and ours is going to be called plumbers. Oh, I can't even spell tonight. Good start, Mr. Morgan. Plumbers, and we make a blank array, you remember, by just popping some square brackets. And I'm going to leave a bit of space because I'm going to then start my main menu. I'm going to use a dirty while loop for this, while true. And remember that the point of that is it's just an infinite loop. We don't need to have a way to exit the loop. We just need to do that. And now I'm going to build my menu. Now, remember, it has to be nice looking. So I'm going to do just a print. Something like, heats, plumbers. It's going to appear at the top of the screen. We'll make it look a bit more like a menu. I might even go to the effort of doing something like this. Print a nice sort of underline before doing else. A few more of them in there. I'll do. And then I'm going to put my menu commands. And for that, I'm going to make it equal to a variable. So I'm going to say menu equals input. And then in brackets, I'm going to actually write my menu. And remember, you need to make this look reasonably nice. So I'm going to say 1 add plumber. I'm going to put a slash in to make sure that I can have my next command on the next line. 2 search n. And that's the only 2 options I really need, add plumber and search. And I'm going to do a slash n. And what I'm going to do, this is what I always do, but you can do whatever you want here. I like to put the caret character, C-A-R-E-T, the little arrow, and a space there, so that what's going to happen, hopefully, is that's going to pop up. And we are going to have a little prompt for the user to select an option. Now let's just see what that looks like as running code. So you'll see there on the right, I've got Pete's Plumbers, looks like a title. I've got press 1 to add a plumber, press 2 to search. I haven't got any if statements or anything working on that yet, but I've got my menu. It looks good. It works. So let's add a bit of meat to those bones. If the menu is equal to 1, you'll notice there I've put the 1 in single quotes. The reason for that is because I could go to the effort of changing that into an integer, but to be perfectly honest, I'm not going to do any maths with it. So what's the point? Let's just leave it as text and we'll go from there. So if the menu item is 1, I'm going to call a subroutine. The nice part about this is I can just write the name of the subroutine and I can write it later. So if I press 1, I'm going to call my subroutine called add plumber. And else as well. But if they put in anything else apart from the number 1, presumably the number 2, I'm going to call my subroutine search. Now, despite the red lines under those, I can still run my code. It'll still work unless I try and call one of those subroutines, in which case it crashes. And the crash is just saying, I don't know what that subroutine is. I don't know where it is. I don't know what's happening there. So let's write that first subroutine now. And to write a subroutine, we do def, then we give it the name. I'm going to add my plumber. And this subroutine, remember, needs to take in the information about the plumber. Now, the great thing about this is that what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to jump back to, he says very confidently, because he hasn't plugged his iPad in. Here we go. 1 second for my iPad to actually be picked up by my little dongly thing. And we should see something. Go on, computer. There we go. Beautiful. You'll see there that this is what you've done today. That is what you've built today, isn't it? That you designed those yourself, and most of you did it in the electronic documents. So you'll be able to load that up with little fuss. If you gave me your paper, I specifically haven't marked the paper, the written papers yet, so that I can give you them back tomorrow, so you can see them in the exam time. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at that plumber's table there. And in fact, if I scroll down, we designed that as well, didn't we? And I'm going to build that. So I need to ask for a plumber's ID at the very least, and these three at the very least. But I need to be thinking about what can I validate. I need 4 types of validation. So the things I'm going to ask for, hopefully, are going to be reasonably straightforward. So let's start with asking for ID. ID equals input. I'm just going to do ID like that. I'm not going to do any validation straight away. I'm just going to get it all in, get it added to my 2D array, and then we'll put the validation in afterwards. That's the easiest way to do it, because at least you know it's working then before you start messing with validation. And validation can often cause it to break. So we've got ID. We probably need a name, don't we? So I'm not going to go to the effort of doing first name and surname because it's an exam and it's timed. So I'm just going to do name. Again, if this was a real one, I would do first name, surname, break it up into the separate parts, but I'm not going to bother. We said expertise. If I can type. Expertise equals input. Put that there. I don't think I spelled that correct, but you get the idea. It's expertise. It looks to me like expertise. There's an extra E in there somewhere. What's this one? Sorry. Sorry, I've just a comment popped up there. Let's have a look. Yeah, we can share it to the school. That's fine. I popped the link in the Google Classroom pages and stuff like that. JP, you can have a look at that if you want to. This is essentially. Oh, sorry, guys. Thank you. But I'm still showing my tables. I've got the plumber's subroutine here. Sorry, I've done the ID, the name, the expertise. Thank you for popping that up. To answer JP's question, JP, this is very similar to what you're doing in your NEA. It's broadly the same sort of structure, but it's sort of the next level up. Then it's the A-level version of that. So I've got these things, and I'm only addressing just taking in the values at the moment. I'm not going to worry about variables. There was also call out rate, which we said was a float. So I'm going to put my casting for that here. Float, input, rate there. And also we had hourly rate. Your variable names need to be sort of self-documenting. They need to explain what they are. So ideally, you want to be doing things like I'm doing, giving them sensible names. Please don't just call them A and B. Right, okay, so we've got a bunch of stuff there. I can think of a couple of validations I can do on these. Expertise certainly can be lookup. Name can be a presence check. Call out rate, we can do a range check on that, but hourly rate is broadly the same thing. I want one other type of validation, and by far the easiest thing to do validation is like a length check. So let's stick in a telephone number. And remember, never make your telephone number an int. The telephone number should always just be a bog standard input, a string. And that's because we'll lose the leading zero. The zero at the front would disappear if it thought it was a number. Right. That will ask for all those things. Again, I'm not going to do the validation just yet. I'm going to get it working. What we need to do is create a row, because it's a 2D array. And the way we do that is we say row equals, and we do the square brackets. And then within those square brackets, we're going to put the names of all the variables. And now the reason we've got green underlining on here is because, and if you look at the error message, it's saying, well, you've said ID, but you've never used it. And it's the same for all the things down there. The moment we start adding them, the green lines start disappearing from the things further up. I'm going to do this, ID, name, expertise, and hopefully you get in the depth now, letting the autocomplete work for you. So you start typing, and then you can just press tab to select the full thing. So it makes it easier to have the correct variable names. Telephone. So you make your row, and then once you've made your row, you need to add it to the plumbers list. And the way we do that is by saying the list first, putting dot, picking append as our option, and then in brackets, what do we append to the list? What do we add to the 2D array? Well, I'm adding the row. I've got a subroutine there that works pretty well for us for doing all the basics. It's adding it in, and it's adding it to the 2D array. Let's some validation in. Name. Let's put a let's check in there. So all the validations are broadly the same. It's a while loop with an error message in it, and the line above the while loop repeat again. So in this case, whilst the name is equal to 2 sets of speech marks, that's basically they just pressed enter. Well, in that case, I'm going to print out an error message. And again, I always do errors like this, error in capitals, say what it is. And you know, it needs to be perfect for an exam. But if you just mention the type of check, it looks a bit easier. And then we're going to just copy and paste the variable. The variable assignment that came before it, the bit where we did the input. So this will ask for the name. If I put nothing in, it'll go error presence check and ask for the name. Expertise then is going to be one of a list. So I'm going to make up the list. Remember, that's just a bunch of square bracket text in it. And I'm not going to go to and make the mistake of last time where I got all the spelling wrong. I'm just going to mix them up. Let's have a look. It was gas safe. And there was another one. Let's just say an expert in plumbing. Now I've made a mistake there, actually, haven't I? Because I've put the capital letters in. It's much easier when we're doing lookup checks to put everything in lowercase, because the while loop can look a little something like this. While expertise dot lower, and remember that makes it lowercase, is not in the list. But if it's not, let's print again. Error. And this is a lookup check. Okay, in a real program, I wouldn't say that. And then we copy and paste this bit. As you can see here, we're getting through the validation quite quickly. And actually, the validation structure is broadly the same time after time. So while loop, there's an error message, and then we repeat the line asked for the input. Okay, call out rate. I'm going to do a range check on this one. So while call out rate is less than 0, I'm going to print error range check. Okay, the reason I'm saying this is if this is a proper exam, I want to grab the examiner by the hair and go, look at this. It's a range check. Tick it off in your mark scheme. I don't leave anything to chance. You're doing it for me because it's just quicker for me to tick the boxes. And then we're going to copy and paste that call out rate option here. Now, of course, you could have done a format check. The format is much code, and we are time limited. I'm going to leave hourly rate because the validation I can even think to do on hourly rate is the same one we did for call out rate. And I've already got the marks for that. So I'm not going to repeat myself there. And a telephone number, the easiest thing to do with telephone number is do len. That's how many letters or numbers have been used. We're going to say not equal to 11. The telephone number has to be 11. Remember, the not equal to is the exclamation mark and the equal sign. Once again, let's print our error. Length check, and then copy and paste that line up here. Now we have the validation and the adding to a 2D array. The only thing we don't have is it's not actually saving anything to a file yet. So let's add that code. And the where I'm going to add that is just after the bit where it appends. I'm going to do f equals open. And this is where you need to try and find out what the file was called. And I think it was called, where's it gone? Plumberdetails.txt. Make sure that's correct, please. It should be identical. So plumbersdetails.txt. We're going to open it in W mode, which you remember is just write. That's going to delete the file every time it starts to save. We're going to do f.write, and we're going to basically write the contents of, if I can go to the top, sorry, this array. Sorry, my computer's having a bit of a funny turn there. There we go. We're going to write this array, the plumbers array, to the file. But we can't just write the plumbers array to do str before it, because we can only write text into text files. So plumbers. So that's going to stick the plumbers array into the file. And f.close. Run that and see what it actually does. Okay, and see if it works and see if I've made any obvious mistakes. Right, add a plumber. He's ID1. I'm going to do Pete. Pete Plumbers. Pete. He is, well, let's test the validation on this one. Let's say that he is good at nothing. Nope, okay, he's gas safe. There we are. His rate is going to be £5.99 an hour. Well, sorry, call out charge. Hourly, he's £21.56. And his telephone number, let's just test that. Let's just go. Ah, never mind, length check. So that's all working. Yeah. So that adds in. Now, there's something not very nice about that interface, isn't it? The menu doesn't just go back at the top. So maybe I'll tidy that up in a second. But let's have a look to see if it does it. It does. It's loading. It's creating the file that Pete's Plumbers. And if I go into it, it's got all the details. Now, please, whatever you do, do not just memorize this code and splurge it into Replit and click go. Unless you run it once with this saving code as the only code to do with file access, that file won't exist. And if you write the loading code without that file there, it's going to crash when you load it for the first time. So please make sure you do that. And yes, I will just agree with this comment. This plumber is working at, he says very confidently, as nothing appears on his screen. I need to crowdfund for a new Mac. That's what I need to do. Extortionate prices. You're right. You're right. So this save code needs to be run. Okay. Everything else you can just tap in and be like, I'm sure it'll work. Test it out. Make sure it works, because I will run it and I will test it. Make sure you run it once you've done this bit to check that works. Now, remember I said that's looking a bit ugly there, that Pete's Plumbers bit coming to the bottom there. So what I'm going to do is at the end, I'll do it at the beginning actually. What I'm going to do is go right to the top. I'm going to import my two favorite libraries, time and OS. And you remember time will pause it, OS will clear the screen. And I'm just going to go down here. After my if statement, so I'm going to do time.sleep and just pause it for a second. I'm going to do os.system. Yeah. But every time I come back out of the menu, it'll pause for a second, delete everything, and then come back up here and put Pete's Plumbers at the top. So next time this works, this stuff will all be at the top and the screen will be clean. That's making a nice user interface, and that's getting those marks for it. Okay, what about the loading then? Well, the loading's reasonably straightforward and happens up here. Please note though, you must have run the program once, because you need to have this file already there and with something in it. Otherwise the load command won't work. I'm actually going to go and steal some of this because it is broadly very similar. I'm going to copy and paste that. Now we're going to change the mode from W to R, which is read. We are going to remove that line completely, but we're going to leave close there. And this is the magic line, the line that does a lot of the heavy lifting in in 6 lines overall that otherwise you'd have to write lots and lots for. And it's this. Name of the array equals eval. Now, eval was the wonderful function that says, look, the bit in the brackets is not text. Bit in the brackets is code. And I want you to process it as code and make that equal to plumbers. But what's it going to process? Well, it's going to process f.readLine, which is the command that reads the first line of text. That should work reasonably well now. It's going to open the file up. It's going to read the line which has all the information about the array. It's going to turn it back into an array and put that array in plumbers. Then it's going to close. So if I stop this program now and run it, will load the array up. If I add another plumber, I'm going to do 2, do Sean. She's also gas. I can't remember what the other one was. Her rate is the call out rate is a bit higher, £100, and her hourly rate even more extortionate, £99 and a penny, just to be annoying. Telephone, one number different. As you see it pause there, so it paused for a second and then refreshed. And if we go over and have a look here in our plumbers file, you'll see that Pete's there and Sean. So that meets the criteria of saving and loading from the file without too much fuss. Oops, sorry, I'm clicking the wrong button here. Right, let's go back to the code, because we've got this beautiful bit of loading code. We've got this beautiful bit of adding code, but what we haven't got is that last bit, that search. Now jump back to my iPad a minute, because we need to search basically for a plumber. And that's the main point, what this question's asking. And so what were the things that we decided initially that were important enough to put in the plumber's information? We said expertise, call out rate, and hourly rate. So there's 3 potential things that we can look at. Let's go back over here and let's look at the question again. The question is, search for the number of plumbers matching the criteria entered. So that's interesting. It's not just finding the plumber and returning the names of them. It is counting how many plumbers have met the criteria. And that's a little bit different to the things we've done over and over again. So let's write that search function. Now, the nice thing is that the search function is going to be quite easy to write, because all the information we have is sitting in a 2D array. So all we need to do is go through that array for row in plumbers. This will give us a variable called row that has multiple indexes in it that store the information about the plumbers as we were doing it. Now, of course, first of all, I'm getting ahead of myself, we need to search for the criteria. And it says search for the number of plumbers matching the criteria. So let's assume that we are looking for a plumber with a certain expertise. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just rip this line of code off here, and I'm going to stick it in there. So that's what I'm going to be searching for, expertise. I also need to initialize a counting variable here. So I'm going to do count equals 0. And in my plumber, I need to find out which index the expertise is in. This is the easiest way to do it. You could put a loop in there, but it's a bit fussy. So basically, we look at the row and we count how many commas there are between them, how many items of data there are between the start and expertise. Now, the only thing to remember is it's 0 index, which means it starts counting at 0. So ID is 0, name is 1, expertise is 2. And the way we access that is we just go row, square brackets, 2. Now that's given us the expertise. So let's make that an if statement. If the expertise we're looking at, and do we need to dot lower it? It's all right. It'll be fine. Actually, let's do it. Dot lower, just make sure that the search always works. If that is the same as expertise dot lower, so what we search for, then count plus equals 1. That adds 1 to the count. That's all you need in your loop. So then you come back, so you're in line with everything else. So this is after the loop is finished now, and we're going to print out something like found and plumbers. Now, please note the question doesn't ask you to say who those plumbers are. It says search for the number of plumbers. So you don't need to go to the effort of like printing out the results. That has found the number of plumbers. Should we run it and see if it works? Hopefully it will. Now, I believe I have 2 gas safety plumbers in my system. So I'm going to say gas. It found 2 plumbers. And notice, please, that that pause and that refresh is still there. So we've been going for about half an hour now, but we've got code that works and works perfectly. So that's a full mark jobby. How do we get the marks for the annotation? Because that's what question 3 is, all right? It just says, using the internal facility of your chosen IDE, annotate your code from question B to clearly explain the design of your program to another software developer. So what we need there is annotation. Please do not annotate every line, okay? I'm not going to read the annotation in every line. Nobody is. The way you explain things, you explain logical sections. So for instance, I might say, this entire chunk at the top, put a hash in, and I might say, import libraries for later, create a blank plumbers array, then load the plumbers data from a file using eval, turn it to code. Okay, so I've explained that entire chunk there. That's overkill for the level of explanation necessary, really. Then I might explain this. Add plumbers will add plumbers to the array. And then I need to just point out as we go, because I mean, I can read an input, I know what an input is, but you want to point out name has a presence check. We'll want to say expertise has a lookup check. And again, this is just doubling down on making sure you get the marks for that. Call out rate has a range check. Oh, sorry. Typing randomly in line with the code then. And then finally, we've got telephone there, which is a length check, isn't it? And that's a telephone's always a good one to stick in. Don't forget to put the actual hash symbol in. Unlike me, then you will need to explain this a little bit here, because again, if this was the actual exam, the person seeing this will be unfamiliar probably with this style of doing it, because this is a really efficient, nice way of doing it. They'll have seen a million ways of people doing it in nasty manual file access ways, but what we've got is a really nice, efficient way of doing it. So this generate the row for the 2D array and add it to the plumbers array. That's what that 2 bits are doing. And then you'll want to say for this bit at the bottom, save the 2D array to the file. Nothing really complex there. You might want to explain your search function. It's relatively short. I reckon we can do this in just one line. The search function will count the amount of expertise rows that match the search criteria. That's very self-explanatory what's happening in that code. And then finally down here, something like the main menu calls the subroutines. Drop that word in if you can, and pauses for a second before clearing the screen and looping again. The amount of annotation isn't long. It's taken us about 6 minutes as well as me talking about it to get that in there. But all of that comes up to be pretty much a full mark piece of work. If we jump back to the mark scheme and double check, right? First of all, in the banding, it does everything. It's not the majority of the functionality. It literally does everything. Exploited the programming facilities. Well, I've used subroutines. I've used different kinds of loops. Yes, I've ticked all the boxes there. Demonstrating as appropriate tools and techniques. Well, I have. I've used things like .lower. I've imported libraries to make the UI better. Written code is well structured. Subroutines helps a lot with that. And then provide evidence of a completed user interface. Well, the interface is nice. It tends to press. It prompts you in a nice way. It's not confusing. So I'm definitely in that top band. Let's check the indicative content. I've got input. I've got a range check. I've got a length check. I've got a presence check. And I've got a lookup check. So that ticks that 4 of those. I'm storing it and retrieving it from the file and using that autosave 6 lines of code. And my Hci textual is fit for purpose. So there is an 8-mark answer that has 4 marks then of code annotation. Here's the marks for code annotation. You've mentioned validation, you've mentioned the storage, you've mentioned loading, and you've used self-documenting identifiers. In other words, your variable names are good. As long as we've got that, pretty much I'm very happy with it. Now that's quite a short session today, really, 38 minutes. Remembering you've got 40 minutes tomorrow to do all that, and you have to explain it to me as you go. So hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully you've picked up 1 or 2 things from that. What I'll do, I'll take the link for that piece of code and pop it on Google Classroom for you just now, as soon as I finish this live stream. So if you want to go and have a look at it and prod it and try and recreate it yourself, you're more than welcome to. Please remember in tomorrow's lesson, I will be giving you a blank Replit link, and you will be asked to fork it, and you'll be asked to do your work in there. You will not be able to look at any other resources. You'll have to do it from memory and using the facility of the IDE. So hopefully you'll be able to get the most of that. But what I would just impress upon you as much as I possibly can is if you look in this mark scheme, the high hand is for getting the majority of functions. Okay, so it's 7 to 8 of those. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bullet points. You need to get 7 to 8 of them done to get into this band. They don't all have to be done, but you can do it all in a reasonable amount of time if you take your time. Right, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat now. Otherwise, we'll wind up and we'll stop for the evening because it is getting quite late now, and you probably, yeah, you're teenagers. You don't need to sleep. You're all right. You really do need to sleep. Make sure you're rested up and ready to go tomorrow. Right, I can't see any more questions popping up, so I shall say toodaloo. Drop me an email if you need to find out anything or you want anything clarified, and I shall see you tomorrow. Bye, guys. I can't because maths revision doesn't sound like much fun either, but good luck. Good night.